podcast. You're listening to the Premier Rockets podcast. It's H-Town Hoops, hosted by Brandon Scott and Adam Spolane.
That's right. It is the H-Town Hoops podcast. Brandon Scott here with Adam Spolane, Austin Mendez producing this bad boy behind the scenes. And we are coming to you as the Rockets have completed back-to-back wins against the Memphis Grizzlies. They had a game against the Hawks in between there that was canceled due to weather. And then we're talking to you before they visit the Denver Nuggets on Wednesday. Adam, man, look, we've been talking about this team for a little while now, and they have firmly placed themselves as the number 2 seed right now in the Western Conference. And these wins particularly, and I know it's been a little while since we talked, but specifically these last couple of games against Memphis, I feel like are significant, not only because of who they beat and the fact that it's a tiebreaker situation, having taken all 3 of their matchups so far against Memphis. I think they play again at the end of the month. But also just the way that it looked, the execution wise, the way the game in Memphis looked with Alperen Sengun and Jalen Green sort of controlling the game until you had Fred VanVleet close the thing out for him. And then this most recent game where it's Jalen Green, it's Amen Thompson, you're getting contributions from Cam Whitmore and Steven Adams off the bench, and just overall the way it looked. What did you think about these last couple of games that they've shown?
They were both really good wins. To sweep those 2, one on the road, one at home, those were different games. Just being in the building for both, being in the building in Memphis on Thursday, being in the building, last night at Toyota Center, there was a different level of intensity for those games, especially last night with Memphis not wanting to lose. But you could tell Memphis did not want to lose both games. And for the Rockets to win both those games shorthanded, while Memphis had everybody, that's the one aspect of this that's important, is that Memphis, for the most part, had everybody that matters in both games. They had kind of a lengthy injury report going into Thursday's game, but all those guys played, including Morant, who I think was on a little bit of a minutes restriction, but he was still out there. And they had all their guys out there again on Monday, and the Rockets won both. And they built up the lead in the first game. They gave the lead back, but they made the plays down the stretch when it really mattered. Last night, they fall behind by double digits. They get back into the game. They fall behind again by 13. They get back into the game, and again, down the stretch, they made the plays when the game was on the line. I think for a young team to make the plays against that sort of a team when the game is on the line, they aren't doing that last year. They probably aren't doing that. I mean, we saw it just, not even a month ago, where they're blowing leads to Minnesota, where they're blowing leads to Miami. That's some growth right there. And so the fact that they were able to win close games against a really good team, both on the road and at home, when they're shorthanded and the other team is at full strength, that matters. And this isn't a small sample size anymore. Brandon, I remember we were talking about this, early in the year. Is this real after 20 games? And I'm like, you know what? It's probably not a 55-win team. But here we are, and they'll be at the halfway point in 3 games. They finish this trip. It's Denver, Sacramento, and then Portland. They'll be at the halfway point at that point. And right now, they sit here second in the West on a 56-game win pace. Maybe it is real. And I think that if you talk to them, their goals are different now than what they were when the season started. I think when the season started, they wanted to get to the playoffs, maybe make a little bit of noise. I think you have to start talking bigger if you're them at this point. When you're second in the West, that matters. The team that's second in the East right now is Boston. Boston thinks it can win a championship. If you're second in the West at the halfway point, I think you have to start thinking that, hey, maybe we can do something big. Maybe we can get to the finals. Maybe we can win a championship. Again, it seems far-fetched from where we started when this thing, a couple of months ago, but I don't know any way else to put it at this point.
Yeah, I think one of the real cool parts about it so one of the questions that they've answered that isn't necessarily a perfect answer to the question, but it is an answer nonetheless, is like, who is their closer? Who can they rely on at the end of games? How are they going to close out games? How, what does them learning to win look like? And Adam, man, the cool part about it is that they do this thing kind of by committee. Everyone's got a role, but when it comes to who's that alpha guy, who's that closer guy, it's not like you can necessarily predict who it's gonna be on a night-to-night basis, but you do have your usual suspects. And to me, it is an advantage for them to think that they could rely on a different guy on a night in, night out basis. Like, they're not a team that's like, hey, at the end of the game, we know it's got to be Anthony Edwards, or we don't have an answer, or it's got to be what I just used as an example. But on a given night, it could be Fred VanVleet closing for you. It could be Jalen Green. It could be, it could be Amen Thompson coming up with big plays, and he's just such a unique player. We'll talk about him in a little bit. But it looks so, it can look so differently on a given night, but then the common thread is just something that you can always win with, and that's defense, guarding and playing on both ends of the floor. And that's the common thread. That's the thing that they do every night, is the reason why I feel like they're in games, and over time they've been able to figure it out offensively, if that makes sense, Adam. Like, they've been able to defend well enough to keep them competitive as they figure their stuff out on the offensive side of the floor. And that so far seems to have worked out for them. And you can see it manifesting itself in these Memphis games where, it's VanVleet one night that's closing for him. The next night it's Jalen Green hitting the big shot, but it's all facilitated by their overall effort on the defensive side. And Amen Thompson, some of his efforts, chief among it. Of course, Steven Adams, we'll talk about him too, like somebody that's added some quality minutes for the Rockets. Like, it's really an impressive outfit, is my point. It's an impressive way and style of winning.
They're third in defense right now. They lead the league in offensive rebounding. I think they are sixth in turnover rate, and the offense is starting to catch up. And they are 11th now in offensive efficiency, which is, I think, if you would have said, at the start of the season, hey, you're going to be third in defense and 11th in offense, I think that you would have been thrilled with that result. Especially when you consider that the things that they wanted to do well, the offensive rebounding and the turnovers, have been exactly what you thought that they would be. So it has been, it's a unique team in that it can be a number of different guys, like you said. Like, it's not going, you look just the two games against Memphis, it was a different guy really in both. It was Şengün who really was the offense, especially early on in that game on Thursday. And then it was kind of Fred VanVleet coming out of nowhere at the end of the game,
Right.
and hitting the biggest shot of the night. And then last night, Şengün really struggled at the start of the game. He got better towards the end of it, but it was Cam Whitmore who helped get them back in the game. And it was Jalen Green, who was just incredibly, 42 on 18 shots is just an absurd number. So I think that's, I looked at this a while back. I think they've had like 3, 4 or 5 game stretches this season already. And this was, back maybe 3, 4 weeks ago, where they had a different leading scorer, like 4 or 5 straight games. And that happened like 3 different times this season. Like, that's rare. Because normally you're going to have a best player, and that best player is going to lead you in scoring, and he's going to lead you in scoring on most nights. That's not really how this team is built. This team is built for, hey, it might be this guy's night, and it might be this guy, it might be that guy the next night, it might be this other guy the night after, and hey, this guy that hasn't done anything in 3 previous games, he might lead you in scoring the 4th game. So who knows? It's an interesting team in that regard. But they do a lot of things well. The defense is always going to be there. It seems like the rebounding is always going to be there. We aren't talking about the shooting anymore. That's something that we really haven't had to talk about here in the last couple of weeks. Still not great there, but they're getting better. And hey, it turns out Fred VanVleet not going to shoot 30% on open threes this season. I just want to clear that up for people who are a little worried that might happen. That obviously has changed a little bit. So they're playing well. I think that we're not quite at the point to where I think you can say they're a lock playoff team just because of how close everything is in the West. But they got to be feeling really good about where they're at this point of the year.
Oh man, I'm surprised to hear you say that because I feel like they're a lock playoff team. I don't think they're a lock to be, of course, the number 2 seed as they sit right now. But I was just about to bring this point up, Adam, when you mentioned earlier about having to change the expectation, change the narrative a little bit on what this team can expect of itself and what the fans can try to realistically expect from the Rockets. Like, to me, we were going into this season talking about, hey, well, they got to get in that play in, and then as they play well, it was like, okay, well, they look like they'll probably like they could be a playoff team. Now it would be an utter disappointment to not make the playoffs, but even beyond that, I would take it a step further and say that so long as they don't fall all the way down to having to see Oklahoma City in the first round, I don't know why. Like, I'm not saying that they would beat anybody, but they are right there in the conversation. Like, to me, in the Western Conference, it's Oklahoma City and then really just everybody else. I think that, it's not just the Rockets, and I don't even think that they're necessarily the second best team in the Western Conference. I would trust the team that they're playing tonight, that they're playing Wednesday night more in Denver. Obviously, Dallas has been there. And of course, Memphis. I think Memphis and the Rockets are, the 2 teams that weren't in the mix last year that are now, but they would be one of the least trustworthy ones out of all of them because they've done the least out of a lot of these teams that they're right in front of. But they're right there with any other team that's not named the Oklahoma City Thunder. Like right now, I'm looking forward to like a first round matchup where once it comes here, we're talking about a series that they could actually potentially win. Not just some lower seed that gets into the playoffs and is going to be an early out or an easy out for a higher seed. I think they get in the playoffs, and so long as their matchup isn't Oklahoma City, we're talking about an interesting series where it's going to be a dogfight where they'll have a chance to go from the quarterfinals to the semis if it's if it lines up that way. I think they're right there in the mix with any other Western Conference team that's not the Thunder.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with that. We'll see what happens at the trade deadline. Some of these teams that are in the West will get better, although for some of these teams it's kind of hard for them to get better, especially the teams that are over the second apron. So we'll have to wait and see on that. And of course, the Rockets could be one of those teams that we're talking about that looks to make a move before the trade deadline. So who knows there? I just don't want to say like lock in playoffs right now just because of what the West is. And like, are the Lakers going to suddenly get hot with those 2 guys? Are the Phoenix Suns going to figure it out? I just have to, is Minnesota all of a sudden going to like work out of the malaise that it's been in really the entire year? Like those teams have the ceilings are what they are, but I've seen them do it before. And the one thing that I really wanted to pause on with the Rockets early in the year, I think it was at that 20-game stretch. The schedule had been relatively easy. It's gotten tougher, and the Rockets have been able to handle that. The win pace is now a game higher than it was when we last did this. They've dealt with some injuries, and they had pretty remarkable injury luck through the first 25 games of the season, and all of a sudden that's taken a turn. Tari Eason's missed the last 13 games. Jabari Smith has missed the last week and a half, and he's still a month away from returning. Amen Thompson had the suspension that cost him a couple of games. Jalen Green's a little banged up right now. He's still playing. Same thing with Alperen Şengün. Like those guys are still playing, but they're still dealing with some stuff. Dylan Brooks missed some time last month. So the fact that they had to deal with some injuries and they are still dealing with those injuries, and the fact that they have come out on the other side still playing well and they haven't fallen apart the way that they did last year, I think that's really telling for essentially like what the floor of this team is. Like, to me, at this point, I would be surprised if they don't win 50 games. And that's just based off of the depth of the team and the fact that they have been able to survive this injury bug that they've been hit with here in the last few weeks.
So everything you just mentioned has to factor into their strategy and their decision-making when the trade deadline or as the trade deadline approaches. As far as that goes, like, and again, mentioning, hey, we know that the floor seems to be fairly high with this team based off of what we've seen so far. What do you feel like the trade deadline either will or should look like for the Rockets? Like, I feel like there was a point for them early in the season where it's like, hey, watch out for the Rockets to try to go take a big swing and go get a star and try to expedite this process or this track that they're on. Whereas now, I tell you, at least where I'm at, like, I'm staying put. Like, I want to see what does it look like as these young guys develop. To me, especially these Memphis games, these last couple of Memphis games, and maybe even just track it back to since Jabari Smith has been out and Amen Thompson has been in the starting lineup. But it feels like the Rockets are developing a young core, not just the young core that we know that they drafted, but like a reliable young core right before our eyes between Jalen Green, Amen Thompson, and Alperen Şengün. It feels like they've got a really, really good nucleus of three special players, the players that I think are truly special. And then everything around it is starting to like just fit. And especially with the men playing more than he had been, or maybe being featured more because of the starters minutes or whatever it is, like it seems like exactly what fans would have been wanting the Rockets to trade for, what they would have been wanting them to seek in a trade to form, is something that they're developing on their own now with their own young players. And then of course you know what you're going to get with a Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks, the sort of the stabilizing veteran force and everything that they bring on top of it. Like I feel like they have a lot of the ingredients that you would actually be seeking in a trade, which makes me think like their moves would have to be somewhere along the margins or something like that. Like I don't see this being a big swing team the way I did earlier in the year.
No, there's nobody to take a big swing at, in all honesty.
True.
I think so. I don't see them. We've talked about this before, but I don't see them having any interest in Jimmy Butler. That's really the one like big swing that's out there. De'Aaron Fox, I guess, was, but Sacramento has started to play really well since they fired Mike Brown, and I don't think that. I don't think De'Aaron Fox is an Ime Udoka type of player either. So that to me didn't make a whole lot of sense there. So if you ask me, I don't think they may not do anything. They might do something small here or there, but they've got some, like, they're not going to trade anybody that's currently in the rotation at this point. And then you look at like the expiring contracts that they have, the bench guys, the Tates and the Landales and the Jeff Greens. I don't think those guys would get traded either, because I think that they provide a ton of value to everybody. And I think that it would like hurt the group if you're trading those guys. Like there's a chemistry thing there that matters, and there's a vibes thing that does matter. And this team, like when I tell you that this team is close, like this team is remarkably close. And I've covered a lot of Rockets teams over the years. I've never seen one that seems to like each other as much as this one does. So I would be really hesitant to break that up if I were them, to make some sort of a small move at the trade deadline that may or may not help you. Like if I'm them, play it out, see what you've got with these guys, and see how it looks once they get into a postseason environment, because that's going to be very different than in a regular season environment. And, see what happens after that, and then see what happens in the offseason when things, when teams have a little bit more flexibility. But to me, like I bet if you ask the group, and you've been around teams that have been at the trade deadline where they think, yeah, we need something. Like remember how like the Astros almost rioted when they didn't make a trade in 2017.
Yeah.
And like it kind of forced Jeff Luhnow's hand to really do something to go get Justin Verlander at the August deadline. Like I think the Rockets are in the exact opposite place. I think if you ask the players, like, no, don't do anything. Just let us roll with these 14 guys and let's just see what happens. I think that's how much they all like each other. So I just don't know if there's a move out there that like makes you say, you know what, this is going to get us from round 1 to round 2 or round 2 to round 3. I just don't think it's out there.
I think that everything that you said rings true, but on top of that, I want to point out one particular player, and we've mentioned them already, but that's Jalen Green, man. Jalen Green, and people have been joking about this on the internet quite a bit, like how March Jalen Green has come in January. You know, like the heater that he's known to go on late in seasons in his early career so far. We know that March or thereabout is when Jalen Green really gets cooking. And a lot of times, or at least, so far, it's been at times when things have either been out of reach or you're like, hey, man, where was that at earlier in the season? We sure could have used it. But that's just all, part of the growing pains of a young developing player. I feel like he is really figuring some things out, Adam. And I'm gonna be honest, man, even when he was struggling, there are aspects of his game this year that are just that I just like way more. Just overall as a player, he gets after it defensively, even when his shot is not falling, even when, as I have talked about quite a bit, sometimes that jumper is just broken. Jalen Green has one of the more, or has had at least so far, one of the more frustrating and inconsistent jump shots, which I think is what has kept him from really becoming the type of player that I think a lot of people expect him to be. But that hasn't been the case. Like I said, I'm saying all that to say that over the last few weeks or so, we can look at the game logs here and see exactly when it's been. But let's just take January, for example. I mean, he was coming into that game, into the most recent Memphis game, averaging close to 28 for January so far. And they've only played a few games, I understand. But, and then, of course, he goes off to tie his career high with 42. So do whatever the average is there. But he's having a remarkable January, long story short. And the thing that is impressive about it is, man, Adam, he's getting to the basket. He's getting to the rim, scoring on his paint touches. His three ball is falling, so the jump shot looks good. And so you got the best, most ideal combination of skills coming together for Jalen Green with his jump shot and his ability to score around the basket. And, man, to me, it has unleashed something different in Jalen Green, not just that, but playing alongside Amen Thompson in this way. I thought that was on full display in the Monday night game against the Grizzlies. Like, what have you thought of what you've seen from Jalen Green? Because I think a lot of the reason why they're not going to take a big swing is for the reason that you said, because there's nobody to really take a big swing for, or you know what I mean? There's that player might not exist. But also, again, Jalen Green appearing to turn into, and it's probably too soon to say this for sure, but appearing to turn into the type of player that they would be trading for, or just simply the type of player that they have been wanting him to be, or the player that they drafted him to be. It's really starting to look like that as of late.
And a big thing, you mentioned Amen Thompson next to him. It's just they play at a different pace.
Yeah.
And I think that when Jalen Green had his big March, it was because they were playing faster. It had nothing to do with this guy getting hurt or that guy getting hurt. It was just the fact that they were playing faster, and they were playing faster last year before Alperen Şengün got hurt. So you're seeing it now that really ever since they are middle of the pack now in pace. And early in the year, they were towards the bottom of the league in pace. And some of that was just, hey, you have Fred VanVleet, who tends to be a little slower with the basketball. And also you're dumping the ball into Şengün a lot. And that will kind of take the shot clock down. And that will sometimes have possessions go a little bit longer. But now just seeing Amen Thompson being out there on the floor and his ability to rebound, he gets a rebound, he's off. And I think that that's good for Jalen Green. I think that makes Jalen Green a better player when that happens, because the defense is unable to get set, and that just gives him better driving lanes and better options to make things happen. But they still have Alperen Şengün there to if they need it, if they need a bucket, if the possession does slow down, they can still dump it into him. So there was the whole thing, well, can Şengün and Green coexist? And that was the very simple answer from Rafael Stone last year was, because one's a guard and one's a center. Well, you're seeing that, you can have both of those guys exist and play at a high level together because you can play fast. And then when things do bog down, you have the center there to kind of bail you out. But he's shooting the ball well. He's getting to the free throw line. He got to the free throw line 9 times in last night's game. Just the 42 points on 18 shots is that's not something that I think that we would have ever thought we could have seen with him, just with the way that he was playing. So it's all positive. The defense really stands out. The competitiveness really stands out. You can tell he loves that John Morant matchup, and he has really ever since he got into the league. I remember the second game of his second season. Morant scored like 40-something, and he might have hit the 30-point mark or something like that in that game. But they were going at it. They were going back and forth, those two in the second half of that game. And then I remember asking him, like, do you think that you're on that level? Are you trying to get to that level? He's like, yeah, absolutely. Like, he's one of the best. I think I'm going to be one of the best. And you're seeing that right now with him, where he's playing with that sort of confidence. So there are times when the confidence has waned with him in the past. That's not the case right now. Like, he is oozing confidence at this point, and it's helping the team. It raises the ceiling of the team. When he plays at that level, it just raises the ceiling of the team.
Yeah, I remember that game that you're talking about. I want to say that I might have even been there with you when that happened, and the second time they played in this second season. And I remember him feeling or seeming like he was not, I don't want to say indignant, but like, what do you mean? Do I think I'm on that level? Of course I'm on that level. And at the time, and even now, maybe to some degree, but especially at that time, it's like, nah, you're not. We don't look at you as being there yet. We see the vision, but no, we're like you're still kind of in a prove it stage of trying to figure that part out. And you go from then to now, where they're going back and forth, and like incredible athletic kind of like 1%er type of NBA play for 1%er NBA type of play, right? Like that's what this game featured. Like Ja having some moments, and Jalen Green having some moments. Desmond Bane has some moments as well in the third quarter that reminds you that he's also a special type of player, a special type of NBA player. But both of them going back and forth. And remember, Adam, they had that moment, you were there, where where Jalen Green goes back up to him and it's like, yeah, man, like, like I do this too. And Ja, respects it, pats him on the chest, and and they're kind of like, there's a respect thing. Like, yeah, that guy is, one of those, or somebody that's kind of like akin to me or what I am, speaking for like Ja, and from Ja's standpoint. So like, yeah, you can see that, and I just, man, I think that I thought Ryan Hollins put it well, and this is just kind of obvious watching it. Like on the broadcast, Ryan Hollins said, man, those two, talking about Jalen Green and Amen Thompson, they are a blur in transition, just an absolute blur. And to have one of those guys is obviously, a great thing for your, for transition, like, for a team. But to have them both together, and then you're bringing a guy like, Cam Whitmore off the bench, like you got more athletes on top of that, like you're a really dangerous, I think a really dangerous team athletically with those two guys on the floor together, man. Like it was just so obvious in that first quarter where you've got Amen Thompson doing Amen Thompson things where he's like blocks a shot, gets a rebound, makes a key pass, and Jalen Green's just right there to eat it all up, to hit a shot from Amen Thompson collapsing the defense in the paint, to catching the Amen Thompson outlet pass after he's rebounded, because he's given that type of effort. Like there's that one play where Amen Thompson rebounds, gets a rebound, gets it to Jalen Green. I think this is in the first quarter, maybe in the second. Yeah, this is in the first quarter. And Jalen clears half court in three dribbles and gets past Ja Morant for the score. And it's like, hey man, Amen Thompson rebound, pass, 3 dribbles, score. And it's like, yo, this is breakneck pace with these two guys out here. And I just think it is a tremendous development for the Rockets that Jalen Green now is starting to look like a frontline player. How much can you trust it? I mean, you don't have any choice if you're a Rockets fan. You just got to keep watching and kind of let it play out, see how it plays out. But certainly the way it looks right now, that is the type of player that the whole trade conversation originally, or when we were having it earlier in the year, when we were having it last year, the trade conversation is getting a player like what Jalen Green is playing like right now.
Exactly. And you don't have to give up anything to get him. And you've got him signed, and the contract that they signed him to is now looking pretty good.
Yeah.
It might be one of those things where he declines the player's option on the last year and he gets into free agency a little bit earlier. But hey, that's looking like a pretty good deal right now.
All right. So what about Amen Thompson? I mean, Adam, we gotta talk about this guy before we get out of here, man. Like, he's been, how many games has he started now? Is this 5, 6? Where are we at now? I'm losing track. But after that second Memphis game, I want to say he started at least 9 games this year. And since Jabari's been hurt, it's been a handful of games. But either way, the Amen Thompson effect is real. We were just talking about it, man. Like, the rebounding, the defense is the main thing, but the defense, the rebounding, the passing is I think is really good. He's shown, I think, a lot of confidence with his shot. I mean, he scored their first points of the night with a corner 3, right, on Monday, and shot that without hesitation because they were daring him to do so. And man, I just think I don't see how you take this guy off the floor other than like when it's time to give him a breather here or there, or like if he's tired. But to me, Amen Thompson is making the definitive case for why he should get starter minutes. I don't want to get too hung up on who starts and who doesn't. That's a thing that you and I don't necessarily do on this show. But we do talk about playing those key minutes and being in the game in meaningful moments down the stretch. Like, I don't see how you take him off the floor unless he's tired or hurt. Like, to me, again, he's making the definitive case for why he should get the starter minutes no matter who else is healthy on the team. And I think it's why he'll be key to whatever it is that the Rockets accomplish basically from now on. Like, he's going to be a big part of it.
He's not there yet, but he is trending towards being their best player. And he's not far off. Like, there are a couple of things he's got to clean up. Obviously, the shooting being one, the free throw shooting, the ball handling's got to get a little bit better. But everything else, it's hard to find guys that are better defenders. It's hard to find guards that are better rebounders and then just can take the rebound and then just boom, you're up the floor and you're a one-man fast break. Like, that's the stuff that's so special about him. And it's just, he plays the game really at a different speed. And, Steven Adams played with Russell Westbrook. To me, Russell Westbrook is probably like the fastest guy that I've seen on an NBA floor. And Steven Adams, like, no, Amen Thompson is faster than Russell Westbrook. So it's special. And I remember doing this show with you when they finished 4th in that lottery. And it felt like, from a fan base standpoint, that the walls had just caved in, that here you had these 3 just awful seasons. And you're thinking, hey, we're going to get Victor Wembanyama. And if we don't get him, then, hey, there's Scoot Henderson or Brandon Miller's there. And to not get any of the 3. And it turned out that you didn't get the best one. Like, Wembanyama is going to wind up being the best guy, but they probably got the second best guy out of that draft class. And it was a lottery that was a huge disappointment. He's a remarkable player, incredibly coachable. He's gotten a lot better, just a lot more comfortable within the game. The confidence is there. He's not afraid to shoot the ball. He's not far off from being their best player. And I'm not worried about who starts and who comes off the bench because we're a month away from that conversation. It's going to be a while before Jabari Smith Jr. comes back. It is hard for me to think that he is coming off the bench ever again in his NBA career, but who knows? And frankly, I don't, me, I don't think it matters all that much. He's still going to get his minutes, but man, he's something.
Yeah, dude. Adam, look, I know it's kind of an annoying conversation to have because it unnecessarily pitch players against each other.
Yeah.
Especially if the minutes are the math of it all is gonna work itself out. Okay, so I'm not even trying to be reductive or basic in this conversation, and it's not really a knock on Jabari at all either. But it's just like the kid is just so damn undeniable, Adam. Like the idea that you would put this guy on the bench just seems right now. I mean, unless you're telling me this, what we're watching is a fluke, and it doesn't look like it is, because I mean, we saw him as a rookie trend toward this way, and all he's done is get better. Like, I just don't see how you take a dude like this off the floor, and then like, and again, not to be messy or anything like that, but honestly, to Jabari's credit, he fits perfectly as a plug and play type of guy. Whereas, like to me, Amin Thompson is a guy who you don't take him off the floor unless he's tired, unless he needs to come off the floor. And Jabari is the type of guy that can run with any lineup. You know, like you can start him, you can bring him off the bench. There's no bad lineup for him because he shoots, he stretches the floor, he gives you length on both ends, gives you good effort on defense. Like he also coachable or has all the right intangibles. Like you can just put him in with any lineup, with any rotation at any point in the game, and it works. So you can have him out there, not have him out there. Like it just works. He's plug and play. And again, Thompson is just so undeniable. Like I don't, and so many good things happen. Like there's that stretch again, and I keep going back to it. And it happens throughout the game where it's like, whoa, block shot or steal, rebound, pass, dunk, you know, and it's all happening in this compact amount of time. And you're like, whoa, I need to slow down and mark all the different ways that he's impacted. A deflection to keep the, he doesn't get the offensive rebound, but he deflects it off of another guy in trying to get the offensive rebound, and it effectively is one. Like it keeps a possession alive. Like it's all of these little things where you're just trying to mark where he's affecting the game, and it's just all over the place. I'm not trying to say he's like the greatest thing, he's Wilt Chamberlain or whatever, but like it's the dude just affects the game in such a significant way. I don't see how you take him off the floor, and it's a positive development because now you know that you've got a guy here who's still so early on in his career, trending toward, as you say, becoming your best player, and seems to have all the right makeup to keep honing in on this game and becoming that, if that's indeed what is in his trajectory.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem like there's any reason to think that it's not. And it's just each game you watch, you're just taken aback more and more. And he had trouble with Morant in Memphis, and he got in foul trouble in Memphis. And then it was a completely different story last night. Like, I thought he did a much, much better job on Morant last night. Did not get into foul trouble, and Morant did not have nearly the same type of impact on the game last night as he did on Thursday in Memphis. It was Desmond Payne last night he's the one who really helped them build that lead, and then Jake LaRavia having 10 points off the bench, which was not something that I was expecting in last night's game.
Yeah, so speaking of bench points, Cam Whitmore had a really good night, contributed. I mean, like he just is like a microwave, comes in there and is able to impact the game immediately with his scoring. I thought he hit some really big shots for them in the first and second half. Honestly, like they don't win this game without Cam Whitmore. There's no doubt about that. What do you think about, and there's been a lot of conversation online too about Cam Whitmore's role, his minutes, how happy is he? You're up close, obviously, and see it all the time. I like how it seems like they have carved out a role for him, whether he loves it or not, or is satisfied with it or not, is neither here nor there to me. It looks like they've carved out a role for him. We saw what it looks like Monday night when he's making the most of it. What did you think of what you saw from Cam?
No, I think that's the big thing. Like when he makes the most out of it, he's going to get his chances. When he plays well and when he plays the right way, he's going to stay on the floor. When he doesn't play well and when he doesn't play the right way, he's not going to stay on the floor. I think it's really as simple as that. And listen, does that suck for him that the role maybe isn't as consistent as he wants it to be. Yeah, probably. But guess what? That's the league. That's what the NBA is. And there are a lot of good players. You look at this team. Like the Rockets have good players on this team that don't play a lot of times. Jayshawn Tate is a good NBA player, and he went the first 25 games without playing. He might have gotten into one game in the first half. Like, you don't think that guy wanted to play more? Like, this is just part of it. Like, you have to deal with it, and you have to deal with the ups and downs that come with your minutes. You have to deal with the ups and downs that come with your playing time. And there are times when he has handled that well. There are times when he has not handled that well. But when he plays the way he did, and listen, there's still some decision-making aspects of his game last night that weren't great. But for the Rockets, you have to take the good with the bad sometimes. And as long as he's making shots, then that's going to keep him out on the floor a little bit. So like I get where he might not be thrilled with the role that he has on this team, but it's a role. And it's a good team. And there are a lot of guys that would kill for the opportunity that he's getting. And so he's just got to try to make the most out of it. And there will be a time, like I promise you, there will be a time when he is needed to do a whole lot more than what he's doing right now. And so he better be ready when that opportunity comes, because, who knows how often it's going to be there for him. So I think a lot of the stuff that has happened the last couple of weeks has probably been overblown a little bit. But that's on him. Like, he's got to know that, hey, the camera is always going to be on you. When you are doing interviews after games, people are listening to those. And if you say some weird stuff, it's going to get out there and it's going to bounce around the internet for a long time. Like, that's the sort of stuff that as a player, you have to be prepared for. So like he does some things that they need offensively. They can get into a rut sometimes. He has the ability to pull them out, which is what he did last night. He's just got to stay consistent with everything, both with how he acts, with the body language and all that stuff, and just his play on the floor.
Body language was great on Monday night. The play was great for the most part. Like you mentioned, there were some exceptions, but I mean,
there's some times when you just start dying laughing just at some of the shot selection. But hey, that's who he is. That's just the type of player that he is right now, and you just have to live with it.
He's got irrational confidence. I'm just now thinking about this. He plays basketball like a cornerback, like his confidence level relative to probably where it should be is off the charts. But he is a good player, and so you're like I always wonder too, what's it like being one of his teammates, knowing that he's as talented as he is, and just kind of letting them cook. Like, yeah, you know what? That's probably not a good idea, but he's got some special qualities about him, and sometimes he makes really difficult shots. And I mean, he's just a good player, especially when it comes to putting the ball in the basket. So sometimes you live with some of those things, but the irrational confidence part is where I was going with the cornerback thing. Like he's got the mentality at least of a cornerback. Doesn't matter how the last play went, or maybe this isn't a good idea. I've got confidence that I can make this happen, and so I'm going to try to make it happen, man. I am having a really good time watching the Rockets play basketball lately. We're gonna come back and do this again in a
really
week.
Quick. Can I make one other Cam Whitmore?
Yeah. No, I'm here for all of the Cam Whitmore commentary that we can get.
He's the receiver who's always open, and sometimes that works out great. And sometimes they do get you the ball, and then sometimes you're on your fourth team in one season, and they waive you before the second round playoff game.
Yes. That is another one. That's another good comparison, man. The receiver who's like, man, why didn't you get me the ball? You were double covered, and so what? Just chuck it up there. Just throw it up there. I'm gonna go get it. Like he is definitely that dude, man. The irrational confidence. I think it's one of those things, honestly, man, that can help and or can hurt a player. And like you said, man, you got to take the good with the bad. Monday night was an example of mostly the good. And in the proper role, in the proper environment and setup, that is good. That is a good quality to have, especially if you have the leadership and the infrastructure around that to kind of hone that in. So yeah, man, it's been really fun watching them play basketball over these last few weeks. Man, I can't wait to see how all of this stuff plays out. It's going to be really exciting. Let's watch them go on the road. I know you were on the road a little bit, watching them in Memphis and in DC before that. Of course, the weather got a little hairy after that, man. But they got Denver. I was actually in Denver myself for New Year's. I caught the Nuggets and the Hawks on New Year's Day. So that was pretty cool, getting to see Ball Arena for the first time. I'd never been there. So that was pretty cool. The Rockets are about to be there on Wednesday night. So we'll see how that plays out against the Nuggets. And man, it's a really exciting time and a really kind of important stretch for the Rockets as they start to play some really, really good teams here coming up at the end of January. They got the Nuggets, they got the Kings after that, and then they'll be in Portland next Monday. They're back home on MLK Day to face the Pistons. And we can talk after that, between that Pistons and that Cavs game where they're hosting those two teams, see where the Rockets are at that point. But man, this is some interesting times, man. Some interesting times for the team, no doubt.
Yeah, for sure.
No doubt about it. All right, that is Adam Spolane. I am Brandon Scott. Austin Mendez is producing this thing for us behind the scenes. Make sure that you all are subscribed to the H-Town Hoops podcast, wherever it is you get your podcast. You can also catch this in video form on the Sports Radio 610 YouTube page. And until next time, y'all be good.